Fantastic. Let's do it. All right. So good morning and welcome to Broadband 101, Broadband as a Foundation to Rural Economic Development. This is our first webinar in the Moving the Needle on Connectivity in North Idaho webinar series. My name is Angie Edwards-Kutsky. I'm a Community Development Specialist with Clearwater Economic Development Association, serving the 5 counties of North Central Idaho. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all today. We're so excited that you all could join us. The goal of this series is to increase the knowledge and capacity of North Idaho communities on broadband. We hope that you will walk away from today's workshop with a better understanding of your individual as well as collective role in shaping the future of broadband in the 10 counties of North Idaho. This is the first of 5 workshops. We invite you to join us for each of them. You can see on your screen there the dates and the titles for our upcoming ones. There's an Eventbrite link down there. Please register for the full series with us. I'm gonna add a couple people here real quick before I move on to the next slide. All right. And one thing to remember today, we're all learning together, so please don't get overwhelmed. This is a huge, dense topic. And everybody here today is here to provide technical assistance. The goal of this webinar is not a one-off top-down, talk-at-you webinar. The goal is to make real partnerships to attract investment to our region and to improve our broadband connectivity. This webinar series is provided as a part of the Rev Up North Idaho program and is made possible through funding from the USDA Rural Community Development Initiative, the Avista Fund at Innovia, and local membership dollars from both CETA and PAC membership. All right, and for those of us who are joining you right on time, we'll just keep going through our quick reminders here. Today's webinar will be made available after the presentation, including the full slide deck. A link will be emailed to you at the address you used to register. The handouts will be dropped into the chat box when we get to that portion, and they will also be emailed to you as well, along with a link to the registration site for the remaining 4 workshops. If you haven't already done so, take the time to rename yourself with your name and organization. If you have any questions on how to do that, you just hover over your name in the participants box, click on rename, enter the name you'd like to appear, and click on OK. During the presentations, please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. If you do have questions or comments during the presentation, please type them into the chat box along with your name and organization. We'll be monitoring that chat and we'll address the questions and comments in the designated Q&A periods of the agenda or during the section breaks. A break is built into the schedule at about 9:45 a.m. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn the mic over to my co-host today, Dorian Combrick of the Panhandle Area Council.
Thank you, Angie. Good morning, everybody. And once again, thank you for being here for the Broadband 101, Broadband as a Foundation to Rural Economic Development, the first in the webinar series of Moving the Connectivity Needle. I'm Dorian Combrick, Community Development Specialist with Panhandle Area Council, serving the 5 northern counties of Idaho. We want you to know that there's been a lot of thought and effort on the part of Clearwater Economic Development, Panhandle Area Council, and BroadbandUSA during the planning of this series for the Rev Up North Idaho program. We hope that you learn as much as you can today and in the forthcoming webinars, and that you take this information into your communities and either start or enhance your existing conversations about broadband. With that, I'd like to get us started learning and introduce our first BroadbandUSA presenter, Mr. Scott Woods. Scott is a Senior Communications Program Specialist with the National Telecommunications and Information Administration BroadbandUSA Initiative. He's the Principal Liaison between the BroadbandUSA Program Office and key strategic partners and external stakeholder groups, including representatives from state and local governments, telecommunications companies, for and nonprofits, and colleges and universities. Prior to his BroadbandUSA management responsibilities, he managed numerous broadband network projects within the BTOP Comprehensive Community Infrastructure portfolio, including projects in California, Arizona, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Texas, West Virginia, Arkansas, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. He's been all over the place. His portfolio of projects included complex, high-profile, and high-risk broadband infrastructure deployment and construction projects with a total value of over $750 million. Prior to being at the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, he served as an associate attorney in the Telecommunications, Media, and Technology Group at Bigham McCutcheon LLP in Washington, D.C., and he holds a Bachelor of Arts from Morehouse College, a Master of Arts in Public Policy from American University, and a Juris Doctor from Howard University School of Law. Thank you so much for being here today, Scott, to share your expertise with us.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be here on behalf of NTIA and Broadband USA. I want to extend my gratitude on behalf of my team and I, definitely to the CETA and PAC staff. They have been absolutely great to work with. So Angie, Christine, Dorian, and Nancy are definitely willing partners, not just with NTIA, Broadband USA, but with our other federal partners as well, as we strive to make a difference in Idaho. So thank you very much for that gracious introduction. Let me start by introducing two exceptional members of my team who have joined us today. Dr. Don Williams, who is a Senior Broadband Development Specialist with Broadband USA. He comes to us with just a wealth of private sector and public experience. Prior to joining NTIA, Don ran his own consulting company and consulted on broadband infrastructure planning and strategic development with state and local governments, municipalities, towns, private providers across the country. And then with Broadband USA, he was one of our principal persons involved in the administration of the BTOP program, where he managed multiple projects under BTOP. And then with Broadband USA, he has worked with communities across the country, north, south, east, west, on broadband strategies under our Broadband USA Technical Assistance Team. So welcome to have Don Williams with us. He will be along with this program shortly and will also facilitate one of our upcoming sessions. So you will see a lot of Don. We're also joined by another senior advisor at NTIA, Karen Archer-Perry, who's a senior policy analyst with Broadband USA and also a part of the technical assistance team. She also comes to us with a wealth of both private and public policy experience. Karen is a practicing electrical engineer by trade. That she spent numerous times at Bell Labs and AT&T, as well as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the FCC, and now she's lended her expertise at Broadband USA and NTIA, where she coordinates a lot with communities and our federal agency partners, USDA and EDA. So I want to thank them before we get started. Next slide, please. And so as was said in the beginning, this is a series of workshops that we're planning with Idaho, with a conjunction with CETA and PAC. And then the goal is to, again, build capacity for stakeholders and make sure that you have a solid foundation and you're aware of, obviously, the benefits of broadband, but also the resources that are available to you on a local, state, and federal basis. Next slide, please. So before we begin, I'm just going to give you a very brief 30-second overview of NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, based in Washington, D.C., is part of the Department of Commerce, and we advise the executive branch on international domestic telecommunications policy issues, right? We focus on three broad goals: expanding broadband access and adoption, expanding the use of spectrum by all users, and ensuring that the internet remains an engine for continued innovation and economic growth. All right, in the Broadband USA team, we focus exclusively on expanding broadband access and adoption, and we work a lot with communities across the country. Next slide, please. So under Broadband USA, we have three tools that we use. We educate, we assist, and convene. You know, we educate and try to arm stakeholders and community leaders with the right approaches to help them make the right decisions. And that's what we're helping try to do today with the Move the Needle initiative with Idaho. We assist by conducting, before COVID, in-person workshops, and now in COVID, and we're virtual. but these events really land to advance the conversation and hopefully share lessons learned regarding broadband connectivity and digital inclusion. And then also we convene a number of technical assistance engagements regarding planning, funding, and implementation for their broadband projects. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is basically the umbrella of services that we provide under Broadband USA. We really focus on community outcomes. We work a lot with federal agency partners under our partnerships silo, really to advance and recommend best practices, improve coordination. You know, obviously under the technical assistance program that I manage, we work a lot with communities on an array of different activities. Primarily under infrastructure, digital inclusion, the data analysis and mapping, which you'll see is a session that we'll provide here in the upcoming session. And again, you can go to our website and we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. We have a lot of solution guides and tools, best practices that we can use. We just launched our national broadband availability map. We'll talk about that in a later session. But again, we're here to help communities again, just move forward and engage with stakeholders, private providers, local government officials, et cetera. Next slide, please. So most of our work is in the area of assistance, planning, funding, and implementation. Most of the communities that we work with, about 90% of our engagements, about 505 since 2015. Most of you are just getting started, planning. How do I get started? How do I engage with service providers? How do I engage with stakeholders in my community? But there are also 3 other elements that the other series will address, which is the funding, that's the partnerships, the implementation, the actual execution of the plan, and working with a service provider to deploy broadband infrastructure. Next slide, please. All right, so let's get started. I know I just wanted to take a little time so folks can understand NTIA, who we are, what we do. But now we're going to spend a little time on the broadband basics. And this is section, is designed to go over broadband terms and issues and network understanding and operation so that we have the same framework as we move forward through these sessions. A lot of these terms you will have heard, you may be familiar with, but we're going to go through them just to make sure that we all have the same frame of reference and understanding as we move forward through these sessions, but as you deal with your stakeholders and interact with the service providers in your community. Next slide, please. So first we'll start off. The common question that we always deal with is, what is broadband, right? It refers to the high-speed internet access. It's characterized that it's always on and significantly faster than what we realized was traditional dial-up access back in the day, right? Broadband includes several high-speed transmission technologies, such as fiber, wireless, DSL, and coaxial cable. Each one has high-speed broadband internet access, but performance-wise, they all operate very differently. And we're going to go over some of that. Right now, the FCC currently defines high-speed internet access as download speeds of at least 25 megabits per second and upload speeds of at least 3 megabits per second. So you'll oftentimes hear the phrase or the term 25 or 25.3 as the broadband standard. I want to note here, though, that that's the FCC's definition. A number of states have created their own broadband standard, if you will. I know the Idaho Broadband Task Force currently debating, thinking about establishing a standard. So states do have flexibility in determining what broadband standard will meet their needs of their state and local governments. Next slide, please. So just for context, 10 years ago, the FCC, which Karen Perry helped craft and draft, by the way, came out with this national broadband plan, and it forecasted plan goals for 2020, right? Goal number 1 was at least 100 million US households or homes would have affordable access to actual download speeds of at least 100 megabits download and upload speeds of at least 50 megabits per second. And then goal number 4, I'm just highlighting 2 of the goals in the 2010 plan, that every American community should have affordable access to at least 1 gigabit per second broadband service to anchor institutions. And those are your schools, your hospitals, your libraries, your government buildings. So those were some of the two, highlight of the two goals that the National Broadband Plan established in 2010. Next slide, please. I'm not going to ask the question if we're there yet. So the question that we often deal when we work with communities is, why does broadband matter? Well, now I like to make that a declarative statement, why broadband matters. We understand, especially with the impact of COVID, that broadband is the link that ties communities together. It doesn't matter if your community is urban center or remote plain, rural area. High-speed access is the tool that will help your community members, and institutions thrive, right? Two of the main issues that COVID has impacted is education, the ability of our children to participate in distance learning. Post-secondary colleges and universities have gone online. So there's been a huge demand on increased broadband bandwidth and connectivity. Also in the area of telemedicine and telehealth. Again, I had, just to share a personal story, had scheduled minor knee surgery back in May, which was almost at the height of the pandemic. And a lot of my initial pre-surgical consultations had to be done virtually. I'm sure many of you have similar stories where you couldn't actually go into a doctor's office because of restrictions, but you still wanted to be able to access and have the proper care and consultation with health providers. So broadband connectivity actually encourages and helps you utilize applications that will help benefit you and the community. Next slide, please. So they also, with local economic development, we know broadband matters, local businesses, the provision of government services, public safety, and just in the community, right? We hear a lot working in the community, particularly with real estate professionals, that it's really hard to buy and sell homes that don't have adequate broadband. We know from a local economic development, there have been tons of studies have been conducted that shows the impact, the economic impact of robust broadband connectivity, particularly on sales, on the ability of the community to telework, and the like. So we know that broadband is very important, and I'm not telling you anything that you already don't know and definitely have not experienced in this COVID era. Next slide, please. So let's start with some basic terms, right? As I mentioned before, broadband speeds are important to understand when sending information, that's called upload, and receiving information, that's called download. Upload speeds are generally characterized as the speed in which a system sends data to a remote server. So when you, on your computer or your device or your tablet, click something to send, right? You're uploading pictures to a website. You're uploading files or reports for work or from other purposes. You're uploading crop data and sensitivity analyses. That requires upload speeds. And then the download speed is the speed at which the system receives data from another system or computer. We really experience that in entertainment. So when we're accessing Netflix and Hulu and downloading YouTube and watching videos on YouTube, we're downloading information from a remote server or remote computer. That's what classifies a download speed. The speed at which you can access that data and then ultimately view it for entertainment or other purposes. Next slide, please. So again, we already talked about speed, the pace at which data passes through the network connection. That's generally measured by megabits per second. In some communities, as we learned very recently, they're still experiencing speeds in kilobits per second, which is significantly less than megabits. But you will also hear terms like bandwidth, right? Bandwidth is that capacity or maximum amount of data that can pass through a network at any given time. So the bandwidth, think of that of the analogy as lanes on a highway, right? How many cars can I pass, get on this highway to traverse from point A to point B? That's bandwidth. To get technical, you're also here more on the technical side with service providers about latency. And that's a delay between a user's request for data, i.e. the click on your mouse or the click or tap on your device, and the delivery of that data from a website. We call that website accessibility. Some technologies, there's different latency requirements. Like satellite has more latency between when the end user clicks and when that actual access of that data occurs. That directly impacts productivity, and other functions. And then service providers are also judged on reliability, both as an industry standard and from end users. And that is the consistency and predictability at which broadband service is provided. On the industry standard that's governed by the FCC, it's generally at a 4.9 or 5.9 level service. And that's that the broadband service must be up 99.99999% of the time over the course of a given service period. So that's a very, very, very high standard. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for you in the community, right? We judge everything by a baseline speed evaluation. We understand that fast, reliable internet is vital for our communities to fully participate in local economies, national economy, and the global economy. But download speeds are important, and that varies based on the activity, what you're doing, the location of where you are vis-a-vis the broadband facilities, and then the number of users that you have on a network, on a system at any given time, right? From your perspective, you really are evaluating if you have the adequate speeds for not just today's capabilities, but what's coming next down the line in next generation smart technology and smart capabilities, right? And also understand, as I said before, different broadband technologies have very different speeds and capabilities. So you have to understand both the benefits and the drawbacks from various technologies that you could pursue and that may be deployed. Excuse me. On the bottom of this slide, you just have here, and you can access this on our website, we have recommended speeds for the type of entity. So if you're working from home, or your home connection should have at minimum the baseline FCC definition of broadband. Even in COVID, that should probably be more, but we have to be realistic. Not every home, not every community is going to be able to deploy, let's say, a fiber to the home system. So we have to be flexible. If you're a small business, 50 megabits per second of download is going to be very important, as well as symmetrical speeds when you're uploading information, and not just accessing or downloading information, when you're uploading information and reports for employees. And then also we're looking at schools, hospitals, and libraries. So next slide, please. And so right here, again, we have a speed test, and you can access a speed simulator on our website. And you really want to ask yourself, what broadband goals would you set for your community? Those goals should be set locally based on stakeholder input and community priorities. And you can revise these goals as you get more input from stakeholders. So I encourage you on your own time and at your leisure, if you want to click on our BroadbandUSA simulator speed chart, and you can see in terms of productivity, if I have a certain type of speed or connection, what I can do in terms of downloading and accessing various types of functions and capabilities. I'm a little bit over time, so I would encourage everyone to access this information. Again, Karen just put something in the chat, what applications do you use? And then you can accordingly see how that correlates with the speed that you need.
Well, we're still going to take a minute, I think, and Angie's gonna click on it now, and we're going to show it.
Let's do that. All right, Angie,
yeah.
You can click that link right there, BroadbandUSA, the simulator chart, the speed test on the bottom. That's a hyperlink there. If you click on that, right to it.
I don't want to knock out the fun parts.
Okay, let's not do that. No one wants to let me talk, so I'll do.
Well, and if you were, I don't know about everybody else, but if you were listening to Scott talk and you heard his voice get fast and slow, which I did on my end, that was latency. Is because he's talking over the internet as opposed to calling in on a phone line, which might have a higher reliability or better sound quality. I could hear the latency in his voice. in terms of how that transmission happened. That was latency in terms of how he came across.
That was
Scott.
good clarification. I thought you were going to tell me I had a face for radio.
No, it was just there was latency at one point in how your voice came across. No, but will you walk through this one again?
So let's walk through this example really quick. So you can access this on our website, but it just shows you if you have a certain connection, how fast you can access certain applications or functionality. So if you can go to that dialog box right there and drop down. So let's say I'm a business and I have a 10-car processor. Let's click that and then hit start. Now again, that shows you how fast I can access that functionality. Again, if I'm a business. Again, if you're a 1 megabit connection, we're still waiting. It hasn't completed yet. And so when we get back to, full, business capabilities and being able to process information, connectivity is going to be very important. Let's do one more, because that was sort of one of the lower files. If you hit reset, go down there. Let's do a bigger file. Let's go download data files. So if you are a company or a business and you wanted, or a farm and you want to download some crop analyses from USDA or guidance, let's go ahead and hit start and see what that does. So again, that gigabit connection is pretty fast. 100 megabits, I'm waiting for, a little bit. 50, maybe I'll take a call, I'm waiting, go walk the dog, right? 10 or 1, I might want to go do something else and come back. And this harkens back to the days when, I don't know if any of you recall dial-up and spooling, where we had really, really slow service. And you would click something to either download a song off of iTunes or pictures, and upload pictures on Facebook, and it would just, spool, spin, because the connectivity, the bandwidth wasn't there. So, you can see this, even to download a data file, anything under 50 megs, it's taken some time, and that directly correlates to productivity or lack thereof in some instances. So I encourage everyone to, access this on our website, and I think we're going to do another test right now as we go to break. So if we can go back to the presentation, please. And notice we were still waiting on that on that 1 meg connection. So this is a good time to pause and enter into question and answer from our participants, as well as, if you need to, take a strategic break. So Karen, are you facilitating this, or is it Angie or Dorian? I apologize.
Either one. If there's any questions, we'll take them, I think.
Okay. Are there any questions? You can put them in the chat, and we'll be free to address those. Okay, no questions coming through.
Okay.
Okay, let me just reiterate, I know this is a lot of information and we're coming at you pretty fast. Don't feel like, you have to have all of this figured out. See the team, the PAC teams, BroadbandUSA teams, will be available to address any question that you have away from these scheduled sessions. So.
Angie, did you say that we'd take a break at 9:45? So
we still have the network architecture part.
Okay, yeah. So let's do network architecture and then we take a break. Got it. Thank you.
So next slide, please. All right, so we'll take a little time and talk about broadband network architecture. Again, these are just definitions to help aid your understanding of some common terms and phrases that you may hear or you have heard when talking about broadband infrastructure. When you talk about backbone, we're talking about the major high-speed transmission lines that link smaller networks across the country. right? These are akin to federal interstate highway systems that take us from one part of the country, cross country, to the next. But there are also broadband networks that have similar functions and similar designs. You can go from Lewiston to Chicago, or from Seattle to Los Angeles, and Los Angeles to Miami. That typically how the network travels across, data travels across the backbone. And then throughout that network, there are various internet access locations, internet access points in urban areas, urban centers, but not just in urban centers. They're actually spread out across the country. So if you look at that map up there, that's a graphic representation, but the actual high-speed transmission networks that you'll see is probably 100 times, 1,000 times more intense, impactful than what you see there. And then when we talk about middle mile, that's the connection between the backbone network and local networks, right? That's akin to your local, your state highways. That middle mile traffic is going to take that from the last mile end user and then connect it to that major, backbone that then leads to an internet access point in one of our center areas. And then last mile affects all of us because that's the end user connection. That is the actual connection between the network and end user homes and businesses. Particularly in rural areas, that last mile, because of population density, that becomes the challenge for service providers because of the ROI and the business models. They don't have the population density to support and justify, in some cases, building and the construction costs for last mile. So that's the challenge that we have to ensure that we're addressing last mile connectivity in rural areas. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some of the transmission technology. We'll talk about fiber first. There are really two main types of fiber connections that can be done by an aerial process attached to poles. And the fiber cables are deployed using existing pole infrastructure, usually by an electric utility or co-op or a municipal utility. They're more exposed to elements, so it's typically more cost effective because you're attaching the poles and it's less construction. But maybe less suited for areas with extreme weather where trees and other natural phenomena could knock the power lines, the power poles down. And then another process to deploy fiber optic is buried. That's more expensive. The cables are buried or installed in underground conduit, generally through right-of-ways, both public and private right-of-ways. It's more difficult to repair, but repairs are less frequent. So more difficult meaning that you have to generally, go to that. If it's cut, you have to dig up that portion and get a fiber splicer. That's the term that they use of the service technician that can be able to repair that. Typically, again, because it's require a lot of construction, it's more expensive, but may be suited for areas with extreme weather patterns because once it goes underground and in the conduit, again, it is protected. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about some of the copper-based technologies that use infrastructure deployed by cable, TV providers, and telephone providers. First is coaxial cable, commonly known as coax, right? Coax cable was originally installed for cable TV. Currently, it's the dominant technology for residential broadband services across the country because that infrastructure, again, had already been installed in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. But the service is not symmetrical with fast download and slow upload speed. So, typically in the cable service, you'll have a faster download speed than an upload speed. So that service is not symmetrical. And then a lot slower, by the way, is the DSL service. The digital subscriber line. That service is offered over the traditional copper-based telephone network. Again, it can't match the speeds of coaxial cable or fiber, but its speeds degrade rapidly over long distances. So the further you are away from that DSL facility, the less speed that you're going to get just by the limitations of the technology. Next slide, please. And then finally, we have our wireless technologies. And wireless technologies are characterized using directional equipment to provide service over a wide area using various frequencies. There's fixed, right? Wireless are devices that provide service in fixed or standing locations. There's mobile, everyone familiar with mobile networks. That's a form of wireless technology. That's cellular networks that deliver service to mobile end users through the cell towers. We've all seen them. There's equipment attached to the cell towers that then allow your phone to then access them for calls and to access in some instances the internet. Satellite, that's geostationary satellites above the earth that provide service in low density locations. Again, we told you how satellite technologies is plagued by latency issues. And then we've all seen microwave technologies, right? That's mid to high frequency signals that deliver service between line of sight locations. So with microwave, generally that technology requires a direct line of sight. So if there are any foliage or trees or buildings that will block, again, that type of technology would then be limited because of the direct line of sight requirements. Next slide, please. And so this slide just shows just graphically the various broadband connection types. And you'll see this slide again in another couple of our sessions that we have upcoming. But you can see up to the top left, that's a typical, a wireless setup. You have a tower with equipment that's broadcasting in a fixed and direct location. And then on an end user business or home, you'll have equipment that's attached, and that's how they access that technology and that functionality. Again, a coaxial cable right next to it, that's generally underground. It's part of the cable deployment for those of us who received, cable service if our homes are old enough. And then newer homes, you may have an aerial fiber deployment out to the right, the upper right-hand corner coming off of a pole. Or here you can see right here where it says buried fiber deployment. If you're driving around and you see a white and orange cone sticking out of the ground, that's generally a marker or indicator that there's some buried fiber there. Again, and those allow for direct fiber to the home access and uses. I want to call your attention to a couple of points on this. We've all seen these as we drive along both the interstate and local highways. You'll see these really ugly brown buildings off to the side, and you wonder, what is that? And it may have a cell tower connected to it or some other utility requirement. But those are generally middle mile communication huts, very protected, very secure. And in those are millions of dollars worth of equipment that regulate broadband and communications and telephone networks. So if you ever have the occasion to visit one, if you're ever so lucky, it's just racks and racks of computers and servers that actually regulate the internet traffic and our networks. And then you also see in some areas, and we'll talk about this a little more in subsequent sessions, some area nodes that allows for the aggregation of traffic, and you'll see those out in the community as well. And then finally, the example of a community anchor institution that will be directly connected to the middle mile network and some of the backbone networks that we have. So you can review that slide just to familiarize yourself with some of the broadband connection types. Next slide, please. And so this is my final slide, and I want to thank you for your attention this morning. And the goal is, you always say, what is the goal? The goal we have is to establish the connected community. And what is that? That is, no matter where you live, no matter what you do, no matter where you are connected and you have access. And that access, broadband access, high-speed broadband access, will allow for a lot of different availability of applications, a lot of opportunities to really take advantage of the next generation economy. Again, if you're a business, resiliency and business continuity. We're seeing this directly in the COVID epidemic. Businesses that were able to switch immediately employees to telework. Took advantage of some business continuity and resiliency where others, just weren't able to accomplish that. Again, it allows for data-driven decisions. economic development. We'll talk about that more when Don does his session. Smart technology, again, whether you're precision farming, precision agriculture, smart grid for utility, smart city operation, whatever you want to call it, whatever you need, you're going to need that broadband technology, that broadband infrastructure to be able to run that. And the goal is, again, no matter where you live, no matter who you are, no matter what you do, you are connected and you have access to that information. You have access to those applications that really impact the quality of your life, your business, and your well-being. Next slide, please. And that's it. So we're going to take a 5-minute break here. Again, we encourage you to use these links here. You can run your own speed test, either on your device, your computer, or your smartphone. And we encourage you to use the chat room to let us know what your results are. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to the moderator for our 5-minute break. And thank you very much for your attention this morning.
Hey, Scott, this is Christine, and we did have a question that came in just a little bit late, and we didn't catch it at the Q&A session.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to address it now, but it is very briefly, how can data mapping be used for economic development?
So very good question. So I know for what we do with the NBAM, the National Broadband Availability Map, is really taking information about where broadband is and where it is not. Again, a lot of industries now require data on the populations and the industries that they serve. And so data and mapping allows really your state and your local government to collect information about the citizenry. And we'll have some examples, and I encourage you to come to our data session that Karen Perry is going to facilitate on the schedule, and we'll show you how to do that. But that's just it's really being able to provide as much information about your population, your workforce, what's available in your community. And you can use that information to, again, entice and encourage investment, to further utilize more efficient services and the like. So again, it's a very useful tool in determining where resources can go, where resources are needed, and on the broadband side, where broadband is and where it is not, almost to the address individual household level. So I hope that answered your question.
Nice. And I see Kathy has already ran her speed test. Kathy, are you in Viola today or are you in Moscow? Moscow. Nice. I do want to take the opportunity here during our break just to look forward a little bit toward our local panel, and we have here on our screen just so you can see what's upcoming, our local panelists, which we are very excited for.
And I'm loving finding out what technologies people are getting. That Kathy's gotten that that great download speed from microwave is wonderful. Okay, I'm really going to take my break now, but I'm loving the speed test results. So it's hard for me to walk away.
All right, looks like we've got about a minute left on our 10-minute break here. So if you want to refill your coffee cups and come back to join us, we'll start getting ready to get started again. All right. And it looks like we do have one question that was dropped in the chat there. Scott, do you want to address that now, or would you like to wait until after our panel? I think we might go ahead and address that one real quick before we move into the panel here, if you don't mind, Scott.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually reading it right now.
Perfect.
I'll read it for the group's presentation. He heard me mention affordability. He said, is there a dollar figure that we use? For example, his rural home is $60 for 5 megabits download and $80 for 10 megabits download. So unfortunately, we don't get into price regulation. The individual internet service providers provide their own services pursuant to the state laws. The state PUC regulates that, and broadband, unfortunately, is unregulated. So no, we have no price controls on that. That's generally determined by local factors like competition and the like. So unfortunately, we can't and don't control that. That's one of those free market elements that we love about our country.
Okay. All right, so the second half of our session today is going to be a local panel of local perspectives on broadband and economic development. The panel will be moderated by myself and Nancy Mabel, the Economic Development Specialist from the Panhandle Area Council. Christine Fry will be acting as our moderator, and she'll join us to facilitate the question and answer portion afterwards. So we are pleased to be joined by a panel of North Idaho stakeholders who have really unique knowledge in broadband and have agreed to share their broadband stories related to their area of expertise. First up, speaking to broadband and education, we're pleased to turn the mic over to Dan Ewert, Vice President of Information Technology and Chief Information Officer for the University of Idaho. Go Vandals. 1 second here, Dan, and I'll cue up your slide.
Well, good morning. I always appreciate a good Go Vandals first thing in the morning, so thank you for that. As Angie mentioned, my name is Dan Ewert. I'm the Vice President for IT and the Chief Information Officer at the University of Idaho. I've been here about 8.5 years, and I've been fortunate enough to work with colleagues in higher education, government, economic development, emergency management, private industry, everybody in Idaho and Washington on improving broadband in our region. But I want to talk to you a little bit today about why broadband is so important to the University of Idaho, but that translates to North Idaho College and K-12 and everything else, so I think I can speak representatively to those things. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the University of Idaho, our mission and our responsibilities are spread all across the state, and achievement of those would simply not be possible without broadband. We have over 60 distinct education, research, and outreach locations in 42 out of 44 counties across the state. And our network is statewide and complicated. And just to give you a little bit of scale, we have over 2,850 wireless access points, 800 switches and routers to make it work. On a daily basis, we have 9,000 concurrent wireless devices connected to our network, and we average over 4 gig of traffic over our internet connection. You can also imagine, and that we have a 10 gig connectivity here in Moscow. I can't say that we have that across the state. It varies widely on our locations. You can imagine how COVID has rapidly accelerated the need for outstanding connectivity, with learning and working going on in homes across Idaho, the US, and the world. Can you go to the next slide, please? So, talk a little bit about why it's so critical to our mission. The majority of our statewide broadband is provided by the Idaho Regional Optical Network, or IRN. That's a nonprofit collaboration of higher education, other nonprofits, hospitals, and the Idaho National Laboratory. And I'll talk a little bit more of this in just a minute, but Idaho has an amazing reach across the state, but it certainly does not reach everywhere. As the BroadbandUSA presentation pointed out earlier, you've got the backbone and the mid-mile and the last-mile connectivity. And we contract with a number of private internet suppliers to service all of our various locations. I do want to touch on a few things here. I can't touch on everything that we do as a university, but from an educational standpoint, beyond the COVID hybrid online in-person education going on right now, U of I has fully online programs, and we provide a broad range of educational services through our extensive extension organization. But like K through 12 education as well, we find ourselves now in a new territory due to COVID. And we have to be able to react to that situation and what is likely to be a new normal once we move past COVID. We have to be able to reach students where they are, and broadband is absolutely critical for that. And due to our geographic reach, we have a heavy reliance on broadband-reliant communication tools, such as Zoom and many, many others. Just as an example, in the first 3 weeks of our semester, the university had almost 20,000 different Zoom sessions lasting 9.8 million minutes. The broadband speed test that you showed earlier, imagine doing that on a slow connection, right? It just wouldn't be possible to do those kinds of things. From a research perspective, we have seen massive growth in the quantity of research data in the last few years. That data is coming from crop sensors, drones, field and forest cams, laboratories, simulations, and many other things that I can't even begin to imagine that our amazing researchers do. We have to be able to move that data from where it's created to where it's used. That data is created everywhere from the remote Taylor Ranch to grazing areas, farmland, experimental forests, and the dairy that we're building in southern Idaho, which is called Cafe, which will be the largest research dairy in the United States. We have to move these massive quantities of data between our researchers to partner institutions and to supercomputing resources at the Idaho National Laboratory and other locations. Think of a picture taken on your cell phone is now a couple of meg. That was simply not transportable years ago. And now it's a requirement, and we transport millions and millions of those every day. So, in addition to education and research, the University of Idaho also supports economic development, and it uses broadband to do that. We work to turn our research into business opportunities. And we support local economic development agencies like the awesome CETA and the awesome Partnership for Economic Prosperity here in Latah County. Because broadband's a multifaceted recruiting tool. It allows for companies to locate here and for people to build companies and to continue careers while their partners move to Moscow to complete their education or to work for the university. Finally, broadband allows us to utilize all the things that the cloud has to offer. From multiple collaborators and multiple vendor partners. All of our library resources, Microsoft Office 365, Zoom, storage, and many, many others simply would not be possible without broadband. And we rely on those services to be able to take our very statewide and mobile workforce and keep them working. So we can go to the next slide, please. So to be honest, the font changed a little bit. Sorry for those of you who might need glasses to read that. I didn't notice that. But to be honest with you, our challenges are the same as those of many other organizations represented in today's presentation, plus many others, and especially for K-12 education. In Idaho, broadband is really hampered by and made more expensive by our geography and our very dispersed population. It's expensive for private providers to try to run fiber or use other technologies over long distance. And the return on investment is difficult to achieve in reaching a lot of our small population centers. It doesn't mean it's not important, it just means it's expensive. So funding for one-time infrastructure investments has got to be a group effort, right? To make it cost effective, I just don't think we can afford to duplicate efforts when we're trying to reach all of these small communities, when we have an opportunity to hopefully plan once and then build once. If we can get broadband to anywhere in the communities that we serve, the various technologies exist as described in the BroadbandUSA presentation earlier to make those final last mile connections to the customers. So, things that benefit in short, things that benefit the University of Idaho benefit the rest of the state as well and the rest of the region. We are very lucky to have the Idaho Regional Optical Network in place to support the activities of the universities. It provides high capacity, 100 gig connectivity high-speed networking, as well as connectivity to other resources that we need from an institutional standpoint, like Internet 2 and connectivity to our partner institutions. But like I said, iron can't meet all these last mile connectivity needs. They are particularly expensive. And this impacts us from the perspective of connecting those research centers I talked about earlier and being able to connect our workforce, especially in these COVID times and what is likely to be a very different working environment post-COVID. If we don't have great connectivity, the state will not be able to be competitive we will not be able to be competitive in recruiting faculty and staff and students, and the state won't be able to be competitive in recruiting residents or building companies in this highly data-driven environment. So go to the next slide. And you can go ahead and forward through these. I had some motion going on. Okay, thank you. So, we have been able to make massive improvements in broadband in the state, especially over the last 5 years. The state currently provides $800,000 a year of support to iron, which enables us to upgrade to 100 gig, and it enables us to provide long-term support and stability for that network. Networks, it's super important that we have redundancy, and redundancy means that you have multiple paths. We used to have problems with people accidentally digging up fiber lines and taking down the internet connectivity for the university. Now with north-south and east-west redundancy and connections from Salt Lake to Seattle through Boise and other locations, we've got the redundancy we need to be successful from a university standpoint. And the University of Idaho now has 13 sites connected via iron, and more are coming. But we'll still need the support of many other providers in order to get connectivity to all of our locations. We're using an Idaho Department of Commerce grant right now to connect extension centers in Bonner County, in Boundary County, and in Kootenai County to our statewide network. And again, those connections will be very valuable for others in those communities, as we'll be providing the capability for guest wireless and wireless connectivity at those locations. So, and the University of Idaho definitely has a goal to have broadband to all the locations across the state. And as the Broadband USA presentation said, there's definitions of broadband which are great, but there's also the needs of a university which are probably exceed those broadband definitions. So we'll have to keep working on that. So I want to finish again with a call for collaboration. If we have the opportunity to work together, we can build an outstanding and scalable infrastructure that benefits your University of Idaho, as well as the entire region in the state. So that's what I'd like to end with, and I thank you for your time and interest, and I'll look forward to answering questions in the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Dan. Nancy, I will turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Dan, and I'll just go ahead and finish it with Go Vandals.
Thank you.
I'm actually interested to know how many people that are on this call were aware of iron before your presentation, but we don't need to get into that now. Broadband and the use of telehealth has become critical component to the health industry, and talking to us today is Mike Baker, Chief Executive Officer of Heritage Health in North Idaho. Thank you, Mike.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. We've moved into a building that is running on DSL, and when a couple of us are doing a video call at the same time, it gets a little choppy. So if I get a frozen face or choppy audio, I'm in Coeur d'Alene, and we do have better service, but it hasn't reached our building yet. So anyway, as you see, I'm Mike Baker. I'm the CEO at Heritage Health. We are a federally qualified health center. We serve about 30,000 patients in Kootenai, Shoshone, and Benewah counties. We provide medical, dental, mental health, substance use treatment services for anybody that needs it. We're also one of 16 federally qualified health centers in Idaho. And together, health centers in Idaho serve over 200,000 patients in both urban and rural areas. In Coeur d'Alene, we certainly have additional healthcare providers, but in many of our rural communities, the FQHC is the only source of primary care for the community. So for us, access to reliable broadband, it's an essential tool. we can't deliver the incredible care that our patients need without access to broadband care. When I go back and look, like our mission at Heritage Health is to provide hope, inspire change, and extend life for our patients in our community. And access to broadband just allows us to do that. We need to be able to connect with our patients. We need to be able to connect with their health records. We need to be able to collaborate with other healthcare providers because in primary care, this isn't something that you just do alone. Primary care is really a team-based approach. And as we all learned, and I know we're all getting tired of COVID, but COVID really opened up some significant challenges for us. You know, for the last 10 years, I've been working really hard to get patients to come to see us, you know, to just stop ignoring something, to come in and physically see us so that we could treat them and, you know, really work on a plan of care so that we could improve their health. Well, you know, as soon as COVID started impacting our communities, we had to quickly message to our patients, hey, maybe it's not a good idea to come in right now. And, you know, we need to find other ways to connect with you. And for a long time, as a federally qualified health center, there were some rules in place at the federal government level and with Medicare that really didn't allow us to get paid to see patients through telehealth. And we've been battling this thing for years and years and years. And all of a sudden, you know, when COVID happened and everybody realized that we had to use telehealth, those rules dropped. And our teams were so ready to turn this on that within 48 hours of the rule change, we were doing about 80% of our visits through telehealth for the first little bit of the COVID crisis. That was an incredible project to spin up and get rolling. I have to say, like, I have an incredible team here that did an amazing job. But some health centers are still struggling to get telehealth up and running. And our teams were able to get that up and running. And what that did really quickly, it allowed us to keep our healthcare professionals safe and our patients safe as you're trying to socially distance. I can cough all I want into my web camera and I'm not going to spread that. Now that's gross and I should wipe my screen down and I should have a mask or whatever, but it allows everybody to be a lot safer. And so as we are walking through all of that, broadband just really became that important challenge for us, or that important tool for us to really make sure we could deliver great care. And so as we look into the future, broadband is going to need to continue to be a tool for us. And in our rural communities, we have to be able to get care to patients. And so when we look at Shoshone County, when we look at the middle of Idaho, we look across Idaho, I mean, we have places that don't have cell service, that don't have any broadband service. And, you know, trying to get care to them is nearly impossible. And so, you know, as you heard from the previous speaker, it is critical that we all collaborate. You know, if we're getting broadband to the schools or to the University of Idaho Extension, we need to include, you know, the healthcare resources in the community. So I think I'm close to being out of time on this. As we walk through, you know, the next 10 years in healthcare, we have a great opportunity, and we need to embrace technology. We need to get broadband out to all of our rural communities so that, you know, and with those tools, we can address the mental health challenges that are, you know, severely impacting our rural communities. Our rural communities have some, you know, really terrible health indicators. And if I can get care from even Coeur d'Alene to the home of one of our patients in a rural community, I know that we can really make a difference in the lives of our patients. So with that, I'll stop there and be available for phone calls. But just remember, in all these conversations, healthcare and broadband access, they go hand in hand. And, you know, the more broadband access we can get, the better the health of our communities and our patients will be. So thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Mike. All right, next we have Curtis Fryer. In addition to his role as Chief Information Officer at Idaho Forest Group, Curtis is also a member of Governor Little's 2019 Idaho Broadband Task Force. Take it away, Curtis.
All right, thank you. You hear me okay?
Man.
All right. So I'll probably end up echoing the same things as Dan and Mike here on extending out to these remote areas. So we're a lumber manufacturer here that you know, we're all the way from Grangeville all the way up to Moyer Springs, and then even over into St. Regis, Montana. We require connectivity all the way from the McCall area for our foresters that are out there. I mean, we're actually doing forest management plans where we're flying drones and we're uploading data on how we actually map out the forest and how we put those plans together. And then of course, all the way up to the Canadian border and through parts of Oregon and Washington as well. So we have a pretty large footprint in the region with a pretty good sized workforce that, as already stated with COVID, we have more people that are working remote and needing that connectivity. And some of the struggles that we're dealing with are keeping those folks connected. So when we have a drone flight out in the woods and we have to come back into like Grangeville or Moyer Springs to upload it, if we get disconnected, it's pretty tough on us to be able to get information out to folks on what these forest management plans look like, remote support and so forth. So we're doing all sorts of interfaces. So as you guys know, as a lumber manufacturer, you've probably been into a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a Do It Best store, and there's Idaho Forest Group products all over the place. Most of that is done through electronic data interfaces, so EDI. So that is all internet-based traffic that if those don't connect, then our virtual inventory and how the transactions for what is being ordered, what is being sold, doesn't happen. So that's critical to us. We also work with vendors around the world. So we're connected through places through Europe, even down into Australia. So like Italy and Germany and over to the UK. We have a pretty large project that is data analytics based. So getting connectivity across the pond, if you will, where we're working on predictive modeling and how we're doing all of the data storage. I mean, you heard some large files from the presenter earlier. I mean, we're talking about moving data that's in the size of terabytes, and we're moving it from Idaho to the UK to Italy, doing all of our remote support stuff with it. We only have about 600 people that are actively doing Zoom, but I can tell you TeamViewer and Log Me In for that remote access is critical for our company. So I mean, we have about 1,200 employees, so we're still relatively small, but our footprint out there with all of the support needs, boy, it's huge. We're doing things with national labs, so that connectivity to the national lab on new ways of technology training, connecting to the universities for various different computer science and mechanical, electrical engineering. That's key for us in these communities to retain and recruit employees for the future. So some of the challenges that we deal with, the same as what you guys have, is what I would call cost-effective symmetrical service. So right now, everybody's been posting all of their broadband speeds out there, and that's all asymmetrical. So you got a nice fast download speed of 50, 100, 1 gig, what have you, but the upload speed's 5 meg, 10 meg, maybe 50 meg. So I'm pushing towards the symmetrical. I'm also looking at redundant service. If I had Dan's map and I would pull it up again, there's a nice black hole that's missing right around Grangeville to Boise, right? So for whatever reason, nobody wants to touch Whitebird Grade. So part of my push with the Idaho Broadband Task Force and with Director Keeley is we need to do something about that we need to connect Grangeville back down through Riggins and into New Meadows and McCall and get that redundant loop north and south in the state. And right now we don't do that. So last month when something happened, which CenturyLink's been very evasive about what happened around Craigmont last month. The fiber got dug up, which left everybody heading south. So Craigmont to Cottonwood to Grangeville, completely dark. No landlines, no cell phones, no nothing. So I did see that Kevin and Joe were on here. First Step was able to hold their own, so I'll give them props for the connectivity in that area. But CenturyLink, yeah, it's only one way in, one way out. So Grangeville's an island. So that was pretty rough for us. And then of course with COVID, telework. My team, we've all been working from home since the middle of March. So we run into the sites on emergencies and some projects and things, but that telework has been really, really tough on us. And I've seen quite a few folks that have been improving their internet at home just to try to stay connected. If they're homesick with one of their kids or what have you, it's been tough to keep connected and do a Zoom meeting. So I sent out the link, and one of my team posted, he's in Blanchard. And Blanchard, let me go back to his results because he gave me a nice little sad face here. He was getting 3 meg down and 1.5 meg up. So, and we consistently have problems with Zoom or Teams for him. So yeah, kind of rough in the Blanchard area there. So, yeah, we need to keep pushing on these local providers, that Grangeville, Lewiston area, and connecting that north and south. I have been pretty happy after 26 years of pedaling through that that black hole between Lewiston and Boise, that we have got CenturyLink to deliver fiber into Grangeville and our Lewiston facilities in the last couple of years. I've also got Athol, Laclede, and Moyer Springs. Believe it or not, I've gotten all of those carriers with Fat Beam and now Ziply Fiber, which was Frontier, to get fiber to all of our facilities. So yeah, I've been working on that for the last 26 years and finally got that type of connectivity. And when I'm talking about some expense there, that it took a lot of time and effort to get that infrastructure built out, and that's really not helping out our folks at home yet. And I really want to continue to push that out. So that's a little bit of my story.
Thank you, Curtis. That was really good information. Now I am very pleased to introduce Chris Way, Chief of Kootenai County Fire and Rescue, to inform us how important broadband is to public safety. Chris, you're on.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to talk about it in kind of two different modes that we deal with in public safety, and that is the emergency realm and then just our everyday operations realm. And so obviously it was interesting. I go back to that great map that showed all the examples of microwave technology and wired and cable technology and the different pieces on the map that showed the different types of buildings. And what we are really relying on a lot in our world is the microwave technology of being able to do it on a mobile application, because we're depending on it. So on the emergency side, we depend on internet connectivity. And I use that word because it's not always broadband. I mean, some of it's cellular at different rates and things. For dispatch, that's how we get our dispatch information to calls. Obviously, it helps run our radio systems, which is how we talk to dispatch. We connect two ways to dispatch. We voice connect via radio, but we also get dispatch information via computers in our vehicles. It's how we document patient care reports when we're taking care of a patient in an ambulance or on a fire truck. We take care of a patient. It goes up into the cloud. We document what we did, and it goes up into the cloud. Probably one of the most interesting things we've done in the last 2.5 to 3 years that required a significant investment was we now have the ability to transmit EKGs to the cardiologist prior to a patient ever arriving at the hospital. So, which is pretty neat because it's 2 o'clock in the morning. That cardiologist that's on call gets the alert directly from the ambulance that's out at the scene, And that cardiologist can make the decision right then and there whether or not the patient's going to go to the emergency room or whether we're going to bypass the emergency room and go straight to the cath lab. So neat things going on, but it all takes connectivity. Again, patient care reports. We've just started a drone program, and we're relying on that internet feedback to where that drone can not only transmit data to the incident commander on scene, but possibly the emergency operations center or the dispatch center so that we can see things. We recently had a couple of drownings on the Spokane River, and we were able to really utilize our drone program. And unfortunately, we didn't find the victim with the drone, but we were able to keep all of the rescuers safe and sound and know their exact location. So the drone was just an example of how we're using, but it all took internet connectivity and broadband to be able to broadcast that back to all of us who were making decisions about resources and things. Obviously, and then the last thing that does impact our emergency response that I wanted to talk about was, I'm sorry, two things here. Incident command, our incident commanders use internet-based programs. I mean, whether if it's a hazmat incident, we're obviously dependent on looking up the hazard that we're dealing with and looking at those things. We also have, each one of our command vehicles has an extensive computer system in it so that we can command incidents and look up information and get things like building pre-plans and hydrant locations and flow rates of hydrants from the water department and things so that we can make good decisions. You know, if we have a large commercial fire, for instance, if Curtis has built one of Curtis's buildings, and I don't want this to ever happen, but you know, if we had a large fire like that where water was going to be so dependent, we'd have to figure out how to get water into the scene from other resources and things. That's all internet based for us. So we rely heavily on the internet. And the last piece with emergency response is social media. We have really started taking an active role in social media. And I know Mike Baker, who knows me well, is sitting there laughing and going, that guy talks about social media. That's probably the worst decision you all ever made, was to have me talk about anything internet related. But we are starting to use social media as a way to get accurate information out, because what we found is no matter what, somebody's going to put it on social media, so it ought to be us with accurate information rather than somebody down the street posting, you know, information about something else. So with that, obviously COVID has happened. We've moved into this, what does that affect every day? And so I've got a minute left, and I just want to touch on all of the things, and I'm going to list them and not try to talk about each one of them, but our daily reporting, our narcotics logs, our scheduling, our logistics programs, our phone and internet, our regular email communication, and now our regular training has taken place. You know, we never used to train, and I would tell you we were overwhelmed and underprepared for COVID, because we had to switch from a group that held together on training regularly and together in the same room every day to not being able to see each other for 4 or 5 months and doing it all virtually, which was a much different piece for us in getting ready. And so that's how we've done it for the last several months. We're just now getting back to the piece of doing it. So our challenges, and I'll finish up with our challenges, are the fact that we're a 24/7 operation. It's not like we can, if we lose internet connectivity, it's not like we can tell the person calling 911, we're sure sorry, but we'll call you back or respond once we get internet back up and going. One of our biggest challenges is the fact that we're a mobile organization. You know, we don't sit at desks, we don't sit at homes, sit in our home, we sit in our stations, but once we go to the call, we still have to have that information. So we just got done, hopefully, knock on wood, done with wildfire season, but we go in a lot of places where our internet connectivity suddenly loses connectivity or loses that ability to move at the speed we need. And ultimately, you know, it's funny to say, but truly in our situation, lives can depend on our connectivity and our ability to connect. So we're very aware of it. We have invested heavily in it over the last few years. I think for anybody that thinks, you know, this isn't the wave of the future, if COVID has done nothing else, it's proven our reliability on some of these things in all facets of how we deliver service to our citizens, and it's going to continue to do so. So I appreciate the opportunity. We certainly are big champions and are willing to be involved in the fight of how we can help move broadband further and faster and bigger in Idaho. So thank you.
Chris, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for all that you do for Kootenai County.
And I'm going to log off and log back on with my phone so that I can answer questions, but I'm on my way to my next engagement. So we'll see you all shortly.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief. All right. Last but certainly not least, on the topic of broadband and agriculture, we're fortunate to have Justin McLeod, Lewis County Commissioner and local agriculture producer, as well as the champion for broadband in Lewis County. And I can tell you as a Lewis County resident that we certainly appreciate his advocacy. Justin.
So here we are in beautiful Lewis County, and frankly, all of North Idaho is beautiful and great. However, to live where we do, we make huge sacrifices, whether it's the 57-mile drive for my wife to Starbucks or fast food in Lewiston, or in my case, being able to read the paper in the morning. And with the mountains and trees, it's just really difficult to have good internet. However, the internet is very important, especially in agriculture and what we're trying to do today. Next slide, please. This is production agriculture, and it has changed. We are just not throwing seed in the ground and covering it up. We're doing everything computer-based. We take the farm equipment and send it home with us, use technology, and that helps us stay profitable. Next slide, please. This is a picture inside of my tractor, and what it's showing, or in these two screens, is the performance of the tractor, and it's sending it to my cell phone via app, so that when I'm not in the tractor, when all my guys are driving, it's telling me exactly how the tractor is performing and if there's any sort of problems. It's mapping the fields, so I understand where we're at through the day, maybe different problems a field may have, and the tractor's driving. And when I say driving, there is someone in the cab, but it is driving via GPS, so I can sit in the tractor when it's my turn, and I can pay my bills. I can upload my expenses and other stuff onto my cloud, so that when I get home, I'm home. I'm home for my kids and my wife and my family. I'm not up in my office. Other things that these computers are doing, it's making variable rate application. It's making adjustments for fertilizer and chemical based on the field and the soil type. All this information gets sent home, so I can make informed decisions on what to grow and what my expenses may be. To grow different kind of crops, it costs $100 to $200 per acre. So knowledge is very beneficial in being productive. Next slide, please. Other ways to stay profitable is efficiency. Breakdowns happen with our stuff all the time. From my command center and a combine, this can be sent to me email. I can then email it to my John Deere technician, who looks it up on his internet through their John Deere intranet system. He can get back to me within a minute. He can tell me exactly what's wrong. So rather than in the old days where you drive out there, you call a technician to come out, it can take hours, maybe days. To fix a small problem, it's all done via the internet. It just makes things so much more cost effective, less complicated, and just better in general for efficiency. Next slide, please. Buying power. We, as farmers, we spend a lot of time looking at equipment. There's lots of different options, different models, different stuff that's coming out, different technology. We can go online and spend hours trying to figure out what we want to do, from pricing to the different equipment. And also it gives us consumer information, gives us knowledge to know what exactly we're going to pay when we go into our local dealer. I try to buy locally. I know other people do, but you know, you can't always trust your local dealer. You want to know that you're getting a fair deal and making your farm more profitable. Next slide, please. Other sites that we use a lot, and mainly for collaboration or maybe chemical buying, they put you in contact with farmers, frankly, around the world, or at least here in the United States, and they can tell you what they're doing on their farms, what's worked well, what hasn't worked well. Sometimes that is more valuable information. It helps improve your bottom line. It helps you not always be in the dark. And it helps you with marketing, frankly. If they tell you what's going on in your area, if you're having a crop failure, you might know, hey, there's a little room on the top end here in the Pacific Northwest. It adds value-based agriculture on the end. Maybe they have a good idea how they're marketing some of their grain, what they're trying to do, some milling, all different sorts of stuff. So it's that information that we get with putting in connection with other farmers around. So next slide, please. And also, we're like everyone else. We like to be connected with our friends and family that live in other areas, especially during a pandemic. And when your neighbor next door makes a mistake, it's fun to get out there and get on a picture and put it on the web for the entire world to see. And I'm sure he appreciates it as much as I do. But it's good to stay connected with people. Next slide, please. Finally, I just want to thank you all and thank CETA, Dodge Snodgrass in general, and tell you what they've done for us. They helped us, Lewis County, apply for a grant, which got awarded to us for $470,000. And that is going to be a last mile build out so we hope to get 500 to 1,000 more homes internet by December. And just in our area. And so that is such a huge deal. And we're talking the 20, 25, 30 speeds. We're really, really excited about this. And we've done some things on our own also. We've gotten some fiber into some different towns. We're working on a middle mile project with some other counties. And so we're actively engaged in trying to get internet for these smaller local communities in our area that deserve the speeds and the technology that are in other places. So anyway, thank you and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Justin. And thank you to all of our panelists. We're going to now move into a question and answer session for our panelists. And it's going to be facilitated by Christine Fry, our Executive Director here at CETA. Christine.
I just want to thank the presenters. I think you gave a realistic picture of the challenges and opportunities that we have with broadband. And we do have about 3 questions. The first one, I think probably ought to actually go to Scott. And the question is there a resource like a multi-layered map that lays out existing network architecture?
Yes, so that's a very good question. So as I referenced in my earlier remarks, we are working on the National Broadband Availability Map, affectionately known as NBAM in the land of acronyms. And we have partnered with a number of different states and we receive state data, the data that the states have authorized to collect, and they share that with us. And so I have to double check on Idaho. Right now, we have 22 states in our national MBAM pilot that we're running. There are a number of states that have their own data collection and mapping initiatives that we hope to build on. And so I do know in the Idaho Broadband Task Force Plan, data mapping and data collection is one of those initiatives. So we just have to coordinate resources. But to answer the question, it would be both a state level activity as well as rolling up into the national broadband availability map.
And can I also add that in our data and mapping workshop that we're going to do with you guys, we're going to really focus on data and mapping as a hands-on activity. So the whole purpose of that workshop is to provide you an overview of all of the broadband data and other federally available data assets that are easy for you to get a hold of so that you don't have to do all the work yourself. And we're going to show you how to access that information. And we're going to really focus on tools, tools that are available so that you can easily get your hands on that information yourself. And we're going to give you a menu of tools that are easy for you to get a hold of, and show you how to use them. And so it's really going to be an overview and a how-to workshop so that you walk out of it with a good core understanding of the federal assets, open public data, and both federal and non-federal tools that make it easy for you to use that data, such that you can use it for grant applications, loan applications, and business planning. And so the NBEM asset will be one we'll be talking about, but we'll also be talking about a whole range of other assets, and it's really a how-to workshop for you.
Thank
And
you.
Karen's going to facilitate that. So this is going to be
My
really
workshop.
someone put the National the Broadband Now website as one of the data sets that we're going to review. And as Karen said, there are other publicly available data sets that we're going to do. So I encourage you to attend that session.
This is the Data is Fun workshop.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Scott and Karen. The next question goes to Dan, and the question is, can you define what is meant by the iron infrastructure?
Sure, I can do my best. So the core function, or the core components of an infrastructure for iron in particular, are the fiber in the ground or the poles, as we described. Some of that fiber is leased from private companies. A little bit of that fiber is owned by iron. And then that fiber has to be connected by equipment. The BroadbandUSA presentation showed the huts that are out there that help to connect the fiber, as well as we then have equipment wherever the fiber terminates or wherever it ends before it becomes last mile. We have equipment there in iron to facilitate that traffic as well. And then part of the infrastructure is good people to manage and maintain all of that as well. So that's what I mean by fiber infrastructure, or by infrastructure for iron.
Thank you. And then another question goes back to Justin, and Justin hasn't shared like what role he's played in providing leadership as a community leader to the more recent expansion of broadband in Lewis County. And Justin, if you could go back a couple of years, and I think maybe about a year and a half ago, when it started out with issues with Pacific cabinets out of Ferdinand, and then it led to a broader project, and what role you played in helping to get the connectivity with CenturyLink. I don't know if Justin's still with us.
I have an interesting relationship with some CenturyLink employees. They come over and hunt, and I was just frustrated in general with our connectivity. And so I twisted their arm a little bit and got the president of CenturyLink on the phone and said, we need to have some fiber connection here. And then I got into contact with a gentleman from a local company here, Airbridge, David McKnight, and they shoot the internet around wirelessly. And so basically what happens, we dug into the ground, we got fiber, we ran it up to some antennas, some towers, small 40, 50-foot towers, shot it to some county-owned towers that we use for radio repeaters, and got a company like Hilco in town so that they could have faster speeds. Pacific cabinets over by Ferdinand. These companies are going to leave our small communities if they can't have faster speeds internet. And in order to keep them and maybe attract new businesses that can employ really good families, support our communities, we just started, and the build out has continued. Airbridge has been great to work with. Some other companies have been, they'd like to jump into, they've been great to work with also, but that's kind of how it all started.
And Justin, there's another question that just came in asking, what type of internet connection do you have in the field? Is it cellular or satellite?
Correct. It would be a cellular, so it's not very good all the time. You know, you shoot it out when you can to your cloud, and then it's on, you know, my home computer when I get back, and there'd be an hour to 2 hours every night of, you know, of book work to do. When I get back, it's essentially done.
Okay, and then we have another question. Can the mapping be placed on the Idaho Department of Commerce Gem Prospector website? And if Eric Forsch is on with us, if he could answer that question.
I don't think Eric is, but I know Jenny is. Jenny, would you like to take that?
Yeah, so I just commented in the box, and I have not used Gem State Prospector for a few years, so I'm not savvy with the infrastructure mapping that it currently has, because it does have some of that mapping already. I don't know where it's pulling from and what that looks like, so we'd have to do a deeper dive into seeing, okay, what's already there and how is it different than what we're looking for. And I need to find out who our expert is in the office now with Gem State Prospector. The point of contact keeps changing. Oh, is it Jerry Miller? Okay, Max says it's Jerry Miller. So I'll talk to Jerry about that.
Okay, that's all the questions that I have. Are there any other questions? You can just unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay, if not, I'd like to turn it over to Don Williams.
Hi, good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Well, listen, I've been doing this for a while, and the last panel, that previous panel, fantastic. I mean, they made it perfectly clear that broadband is vital to the future of these counties and in rural Idaho. And they made it clear in every direction, whether it was distance learning, whether it was economic development, whether it was public safety, telehealth, workforce recruitment, and smart ag. Anyways, it was a wonderful panel. What I'm going to do at the moment here is give you a very quick preview of what's going to be the first session coming up in not that long a length of time. Next slide, please. Great. So one of the things we're going to try to do is we have this roadmap for broadband planning. And we've been using that with communities, both rural, tribal communities, as well as cities and suburban areas. And every single area is different. Every community we work with is different. And this broadband roadmap for planning is really good at establishing what the community needs, and also picking up on what the possibilities are for expanding broadband in this particular community that we're working with. So one of the first things we're going to do is try to define some community objectives. We already know from the previous panel that there's community objectives with learning, telehealth, as I just mentioned. There's also a lot of detailed work we're going to do towards economic development, economic growth. We're going to present a lot of data on how important that is, and that's going to be whether it's business leaders, telecom providers, development organizations. We're also going to focus on institutional connectivity. And again, the last panel brought up that just perfectly in terms of hospitals and universities. And I was also happy to hear that everybody on the last panel was working together going forward. And silos are always a problem when you're working in a larger rural area. So I was really happy to hear that. Then we're also going to be talking about expanded e-government. And again, one of the panelists was very clear about the need for expanded e-government. We're also going to be talking a lot about enhanced education. Another part of this is going to be assessing community needs. As Scott mentioned, I had a consulting firm for a number of years, and we did community assessments, ascertainments. And they're done by a variety of ways: interviews with institutional leaders, mail surveys, phone call surveys. So we're going to talk about some of the different strategies for getting information from your stakeholders in those communities, whether they're institutions, whether they're residential users. We're going to talk about that. Part of that's going to be working on asset inventories. Part of that is also going to be on a gap analysis. So what is it you have and what is it you need in order to reach your goals and your planned outcomes? Another section we're going to work on is stakeholder engagement. So one of the things that we really want to talk about in great detail going forward in the planning session, and let me just say this right away, the planning sessions just continue on. So when you kind of have a broadband plan, the planning doesn't stop. The plan is going to be adapting to every development that you go forward towards implementation of the network. So we're going to be talking about project support, and that's important for stakeholder engagement. We're going to talk about the importance of two-way communications, and we're going to talk about transparency. So when the broadband champions and the task forces are putting together this plan, we want to make sure that, you know, everything is transparent to all the people in the areas where we're talking about. And we also want to make certain that we're managing the expectations of everybody. You know, bringing broadband to rural areas, particularly with difficult terrain, that takes a while. The network is not just going to drop out of the sky. It's going to have to be constructed over some period of time. And part of a successful network construction in rural America is managing the expectations of everyone in terms of timing, when that's going to be developed, how the network is going to be built out. So those are very important ideas. We're also going to be walking through building a team. In many senses, you folks already have a team. When we're looking at teams, we want to make sure that there is enough skill sets in the team to assist that team in driving forward a plan. And when I say driving forward a plan, I'm also talking about broadband champions, individuals in the community who never stop talking about the need for expanding broadband. If there's a meeting about broadband, they're there. So we want to talk about building a good team, which will also impact the ability to discover and use new partnerships going forward. We also want to be talking about evaluating technology. So as Scott mentioned, there's a variety of types of networks. And then within those networks, there's a variety of different kinds of architecture. And we're going to talk about some of those. We're also going to be focusing on, while fiber is obviously, you know, a gold standard, we want to talk about how that fiber gets deployed. We also want to talk about some of the cost factors involved. And the cost factors involved may in fact result in certainly fixed wireless being part of a hybrid system for you. So we want to make certain that we're covering all of the kinds of major issues that go into broadband planning. We're also going to, at the end of that session, talk a little bit about developing a business model and working with public-private partnerships. And that last part of our next session, we're going to expand into another session where we're really going to be focusing on feasibility studies, business planning. I put together a whole lot of feasibility studies for these projects over time. And I think it's never too early to think about funding, to think about financing, and to really begin to focus on a business plan that will allow the network, whether it's a public-private partnership, a private operator, government facility, nonprofit, group of institutions, whatever the network is, it has to make money. However you want to account for it, it has to have a positive cash flow. It has to be able to pay off what debt there is, what loans there are. So I think that's vitally important. So that's pretty much what we're going to do in the planning session. I'll be facilitating much of that, and really look forward to the next session. This current session we're having here is the introduction. I think it's just been going along wonderful. Thanks for everybody setting it up. It takes a lot of work to set these up. Thank you.
So in terms of the next steps, we have a couple of worksheets for you to consider between now and the next month. Angie, before we do this one, let's jump ahead to the next slide and then come back to this one. Oh, maybe the next one. Okay, as Dawn mentioned, we have 4 more sessions lined up. So this was our Broadband 101 and Rural Economic Development session. And the outline that Dawn just walked through really includes a number of the topics he walked through are really covered in our next session, which is really going into that getting started and the economic models and building that business plan. So many of those are covered in the next session, which will be on November 12th. So please sign up for that session if you are available. I think you're going to find it fascinating, and Dawn will be your speaker for the bulk of that session. The December session, I guess data is your holiday gift, is going to be the one we mentioned briefly earlier. And that one is an intensive session on data. And don't be afraid, data really is a lot of fun. And then our January session, we're going to have a lot of guest speakers for January. And that one is really about federal resources and other resources. So we'll have guest speakers who will talk about federal support, state support, philanthropic support, bank support, but basically investment. So that's very much going to be kind of an investment focused session. And then our February session will really be about getting people on the network. So that one's going to be about digital skills, community anchor institutions. Amy Seng is also a member of our technical assistance team, and she's a national expert in this area. She works with people and institutions around the country in this area, and she's going to facilitate this session, but also bring in some additional speakers, and I think you're going to find it fascinating, and it will bring in a lot of new voices and some new concepts in that one. So I think you're going to find that the flavor in each of these sessions is going to be quite a bit different, and I think you're going to find that one fascinating as well. So that's going to be our February session. But now let's kind of roll back. To get from now to our next session, we have a partnership very much between CETA and PAC and BroadbandUSA. And so CETA and PAC, as well as BroadbandUSA, are available to support you between now and the next session. And we created some worksheets to kind of help you kind of think through your broadband planning. And so there's 2 worksheets that we're going to put in the chat function and mail out with your attachments. One of them is about community priorities, and the other one is about stakeholder outreach. And CETA and PAC are going to also host some local technical assistance sessions, and Angie's going to tell you about those in a minute, in order to really facilitate some local conversations between now and when we get together again. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the worksheets, and then Angie's going to tell you a little bit about your local sessions. So the first one is about identifying broadband or community priorities, and the second one is about stakeholder engagement. And so Broadband, of course, doesn't exist by itself. It exists in order to get something done in your community. And so these are really basic worksheets, and the intent of them is to support the kinds of conversations that you've already really started to have in your communities. And the point of the worksheet is to give you an opportunity to get some of those things written down. So the first one really invites you to identify some of those important priorities in your community that are really driving that conversation. And these are some of the priorities that you might end up writing down in a grant application or a loan application, and that really might be part of that broadband plan. These are the things that are the reason for getting together and are what are going to drive investment. These are part of your elevator pitch. So this is why it's important to get together and get something to happen. So that's what goes into this sheet. This is how you engage people and how you get people together. So that's the first sheet. And the second one is about building a stakeholder engagement plan. I think Monica Babine is on our call today, and this is a sheet that we developed that Monica Babine from Washington State University developed, and she lets us use it with her permission. It's an opportunity to really reach broadly in your community. You know, your stakeholder engagement plan is, it can grow and change over time based on those community priorities. You don't have to start out by engaging everybody in your community, but it's nice to kind of have a checklist to give you an opportunity to think about, am I engaging the right people? And have I reached as broadly as I should? So that's the point of that checklist, to ask yourself, you might start with 2 people. Well, in the old days, we used to say 2 people over a cup of coffee at the cafe. I don't know if that works anymore, but you might start with a few people in a short conversation, and then over time engage more people as your team grows or as the initiative grows. But you look at the checklist and figure out how you need to grow. So Angie, would you tell them a little bit about what's going to happen locally?
Yes. All right. So we encourage you to take the time to think about and fill out these exercises on your own or with your own community planning team. But we also wanted to make sure that we provided an opportunity for technical assistance and some group discussion to talk about our shared and collective opportunities, as well as looking at some of our local differences that we might have between our communities. So in 2 weeks here, so kind of our mid-month session, we are going to be hosting Zoom meetings. PAC will be hosting a Zoom meeting for North Idaho constituents from 10 to 11 a.m. and that is Pacific on Thursday, October 22nd. So if you are above Latah County, you can sit in on this one for a shared discussion of your region. And please contact Dorian Combrick to request that link. You can see her contact information there, and we'll also include it in the follow-up email. If you are in the 5 counties of North Central Idaho, we will be holding a session from 9 to 10 a.m. on that same day. So they are concurrent sessions. And please reach out to me for that link there. Special note here, if you are a participating member of a Rev Up community, and you would know that because you are part of a community that has indicated that you are interested in the RCDI program, and hopefully you're aware of that. But we will be reaching out to you individually to make sure that we're planning your technical assistance with you. And we did divide this by region just to kind of have a little bit more local discussion. But if one time works better for you than the other, please feel free to join in on either of these sessions.
It looks like we've wrapped up on time, but we also have agreed to stay on the line for a few minutes longer. So if anybody has additional questions or comments, we're happy to hang out and we'll answer them either in the chat or just by voice. So thank you all for joining us today. We hope we'll see you in a month or in 2 weeks if you're able to join one of the local sessions. And we really appreciate your contributions today, particularly our panelists and our hosts. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks or in a month. Feel free to hang out, answer questions, or share some of your insights if you want to hang out for a few more minutes. Thanks.
you, Karen. And just on behalf of CETA and PAC, we want to really thank our local panelists and also the staff at Broadband USA. It's been fantastic to work with, and I'm not sure if you all caught those super impressive bios here, but that is a wealth of knowledge coming to Idaho, so thank you.